I started to understand what it took to be, not only have a certain level of competence and confidence in certain situations, but being able to take that extra step of what you would call audaciousness, right? I call it boldness. It's the same thing, to be bold, because it's not just about being competent, through repetition, but being able to see new opportunities and be like, okay,
You got it.
I'm going to do that, because you need to be able to take those risks. But to
Yes.
take those risks, you first need to have that baseline level of confidence, right?
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we believe that life is way too short to play small. Our mission is to empower you to live your best audacious life ever, unlocking potential and embracing your unique journey. It's always a pleasure to be here sharing insights and ideas that can help you break through barriers and achieve greatness in your life. I totally appreciate you for spending time out of your day to join us on this transformative journey. Now, just as a fortress stands strong against external threats, our personal constitution serves as a protective barrier, helping us to withstand the pressure and judgments from the outside world while we pursue our dreams. Today, we have a remarkable guest joining us, Mr. Carlos Garcia, co-founder of True Progress Lab. Carlos has dedicated his life to helping individuals overcome imposter syndrome, manage their emotions, and cultivate resilience in the face of adversity. With a background in law and experience as an Army resilience trainer, Carlos understands the importance of crafting a personal ethos, a personal constitution that aligns with your values and vision for life. Carlos is here to share his insights on how to create identity-expanding experiences that push you beyond your comfort zone, enabling you to build confidence and resilience. His work is particularly relevant in today's fast-paced world where self-doubt can hinder progress and personal growth. Join us as we dive into this deep conversation that promises to inspire and equip you with the tools to live audaciously. Enjoy. Hey, Carlos, thank you for joining me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. Thank you for making time to do this.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Ali.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure. Like I said, this is a kind of labor of love for me. And so any opportunity to sit down and talk and engage in dialogue that potentially can help others get to a better place is a fantastic thing to be a part of for me. So thank you for being here to help me fulfill my own personal mission, man. So it works both ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, well, one of the things that we talk about on this podcast often is, again, living that best audacious life. And,
Yeah.
part of that is understanding that each of us are on our own specific pathway, our own journey. And, and on our own individual pathway, we'll come to its own set of obstacles, challenges, pitfalls. They might be similar to others, but they'll still be different because they'll be our own. It's be incumbent on us to find a way to get past through those adversities because truly I believe on the other side of that's where our greatness lies, right? And so it's really fighting through the adversity, get to the other side, and live life audaciously, right? That's kind of the goal here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
now, Carlos, you sort of navigated environments and high stakes sort of environments, it seems, through your background, and I'll sort of get you to talk on that. Actually, maybe it's better just for our audience, so they know give a good sense of who you are, a little bit about your background and what's got you to the point that we're up to now.
Yeah.
We'll start there.
So I'm a co-founder of an organization called True Progress Lab, where essentially I get help people get calm, get bold, and get after it. Essentially, right? Because I used to not be calm, I used to not be bold, and I used to not get after it. Uh, so I used to, I come from humble beginnings, blue collar parents. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a stay at home mom. And they always told me you got to go to school, you got to get good grades, and really good family. And I got the grades. I did the things I needed to do, but throughout school, throughout college, throughout law school, I had this imposter syndrome, that people might know as, where you have these thoughts of not feeling like you're good enough, right? And so when you have these thoughts, what happens is that you avoid opportunities. You think you don't belong in certain rooms, in certain areas, talking to certain people.
You
And
shrink
that,
yourself. You shrink
yeah,
yourself. Make it
right.
small.
Yeah, and that led me to just play small and shrink when I wasn't supposed to. And then I did a lot of studying and personal experimentation and reflection, and I realized that imposter syndrome is sort of it's a growth of something deeper, something that I realized was a fear of being judged. Because there's this famous quote I always give from this psychologist, from 20th century psychologist. His name is Alfred Adler, and he would say all problems are interpersonal problems, meaning, problems come from other people, in relation to other people. So, in other words, if there weren't people around you, you probably wouldn't have imposter syndrome, right? Because there's nobody, you're not comparing yourself to anybody, right? And
Right.
so I realized that it was this fear of being judged, of looking silly, of looking foolish, of making mistakes in public, that stopped me from doing the things I needed to do to get where I needed to be, And so through that, I started figuring out, okay, what is it that I need to do to get over this fear? And so that started with reading. That started with, getting into philosophy, science, neuroscience, psychology, um, what I like to call identity expanding challenges or experiences, where I would essentially create proof to myself, that necessary self-belief and self-trust that I could do hard things, that if I could do these hard things, then these other things that are in front of me, I could knock them down, right? And so through that, I started to understand what it took to be, not only have a certain level of competence and confidence in certain
Mhm.
situations, but being able to take that extra step of what you would call audaciousness, right? I call it boldness. It's the same thing, to be bold, because it's not just about being competent, through repetition, but being able to see new opportunities and be like, okay,
You got it.
I'm going to do that, because you need to be able to take those risks. But to
Yes.
take those risks, you first need to have that baseline level of confidence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. And yeah, again, we would talk. I thought we talk about bold. I know we're off camera. The bold framework is better than yesterday for the B. O for outlast adversity. L is live your truth, and D is disrupt the norm. And
Yeah,
these are sort of the first key steps in towards living that life. And what happens is, and you hit it bang on. Like you'll see new opportunities. Maybe things that were challenges now turn into something else that you didn't realize you wouldn't have seen before if you weren't in that mindset. And so it's
right.
something that I truly, truly believe in, and the idea of playing small, it just doesn't
Yeah.
work because again, we're missing out on those opportunities that you talked about.
Yeah, yeah. And how you define it, like bold, like when you say live your truth, right? The L for bold, living your truth. Like you need to, that means being authentic, right?
That's
Being
right.
being okay with being disliked, not being liked by everybody. You got to be able to be vulnerable and authentic, and that takes a certain level of courage, right? Because people don't want to be disliked. You want to be liked, right? You want to be liked by other people, but often we take that to an extreme, and then we start, like myself, people pleasing, right? Trying to please everybody, and then that turns into just, you're burning yourself out, and you're not pleasing anybody. You try to please everybody, you please nobody, right? So what can you do? What's in your control? Well, being true to you. What is it that you want, right? And one of the things I learned to figure that out is sitting down with myself and figuring out, okay, what is it that I value? You know, what's my story? What is it that I want to be about? What story am I creating in this one life that we have, right? Is it a story of complacency and comfort, or is it a story of trying things and being bold and failing and trying again? I call it personal constitution. People call it your personal ethos. And it's just that document, just like the Constitution. You have your personal constitution
Yep.
of values, of your vision, your mission, your purpose. What are you about, right? What do you want to be about versus what's that old constitution? What are those old thoughts that you kept telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I don't belong here, this isn't for me, I'm not good at this, versus what if, versus I'm going to do this, versus I'm now this person, but you got to back it up with evidence at the end of the day, right? Because this document is just a document unless you actually put forth the effort and create that kind of evidence, that proof that you can do these things, right?
Right. No, you're right. And I think what happens is, and you store up those, like, so every time you try something, you're successful, you're not successful. You're not successful, you learn to take for you the next time, right? So even failure can be, if you view it the right way, it can be very, very different. But what I like about each time you try again, you're sort of adding another notch to your belt, if you will. And
Yeah.
it's like okay, but you tried it before. Why can't you try it again, right? What it does, it gives you some motivation, right? Which is really nice about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love how you mentioned that because, whenever you start something new, you're either going to get frustrated, you're going to get angry, or there's that anxiety when you're around people, right? But you just have to manage your expectations and almost like put a reminder on your phone and remind yourself that whenever you're starting something new, there's going to be that friction, right? That internal friction,
Mhm.
and it's going to be hard in the beginning. You're going to get frustrated or angry, you're going to be anxious or scared. You're going to have more setbacks than wins in the beginning, but that's part of the process. You got to push through that initial phase of friction, you know.
Yep.
And if you don't, you're going to quit. Because if you think about it, what is it that ultimately makes it like derails us, makes us quit early? It's those thoughts, those emotions, that
Mhm.
frustration, that anger,
Mhm.
that boredom, that impatience, that anxiety, that fear, that stress that
Mhm.
makes us like gets in the way, and then we're like, oh, we can't do it, and then boom, we throw in the towel too soon, and you never really know what could have been, right?
Yep, very true. Very, very true. I want to go back because you did make reference to going to law school earlier. I
Mm.
wonder if you would sort of walk us through your professional, if you take us through your professional journey, if you will, because I think there's some really, through the work that we do sometimes, experience come out of that
Mm.
informs what we do moving forward. So I'm just, yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, college and then law school, and then in my law school journey, I didn't have the tools that I needed at the time to take the necessary risks that I needed to take. And so I learned the hard way in law school. It was so somewhat painful. And then early in my legal career, post law school, same issue, right? Like not taking the opportunities I should have taken during law school, and even in my career early on after I graduated law school. And what happened was that I didn't get the opportunities that I knew I was qualified for. I applied for the jobs, but I didn't get the jobs I wanted. And I could all trace it back to not taking the necessary risks, not being bold enough, not doing the things that I needed to take to get to where I needed to be.
Right.
And that all was as a result of not knowing how to manage my thoughts, not knowing how to manage my emotions, not creating the right kind of proof and experiences to build a kind of self trust and self belief to tell myself, okay, you
Hmm.
can do this, right? Because it doesn't come out of thin air. You can't lie to yourself. You can't just do these positive, fluffy, positive affirmations if there's no like concrete evidence and proof behind it, right? And and through that, that's when I started to realize like I needed to do something about it. It was through personal experimentation, um, like physically
Hmm.
demanding experiences. I started doing ultra running. I started doing combat sports, jujitsu, judo. I started reading a lot. I joined the Army JAG Corps, and I became a Army certified resilience trainer. And what that is basically you're training soldiers and leaders and attorneys in the Army on how to build resilience, on how to be calm under pressure, right? The things that I was struggling with. And I started teaching that, because a lot of times when you teach, you need to know what you're doing, what you're saying when you're teaching it. And through teaching it, I learned to apply those same principles in my life. And
How ironic is that? How ironic is that? Is that you struggle with staying
yeah,
calm, like you said, and these principles and resilience and things of these things, and now you're teaching them. That's got to be must have felt wild.
yeah, yeah. And so that also forces you to like get with the flow, right? Because many times, like you were just mentioning, momentum is so important, right? And one of the best ways to build momentum is to schedule increasingly difficult things in front of you, so that you're not just thinking about, oh my God, that one thing, right, that's causing you so much stress and anxiety. You got multiple things, right? You don't have time to be so stressed about this one because you got more difficult things coming in. So it helps you, you've scheduled it, right? And so now you're attacking them little by little and you're growing through that process, That's one of the things that I've learned to do is to
Mhm.
schedule increasingly difficult things, and you force yourself to grow, right? Versus just
Boy,
doing that one thing.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
I do want to kind of go back because you said that you sort of you came to that realization that you had to change and you had to do some things differently.
yeah.
Was there a pivotal moment that triggered that, or it just kind of just happened?
I think it just kind of happened through reflection and understanding and realizing all the things. It was an accumulation of things that were going bad in my life. I was at a very dark point. I think it was right after law school. Uh, you know, I was very depressed. And it was a dark moment for me. And it was difficult, man. Just dragging my feet, feeling sorry for myself, being poopy pants. And it was an accumulation of thinking in the past years at that point what I was missing out on and that I could attribute it to me. It was my responsibility. And so I needed to change that, So I think it was at that point in my life when I was like, enough is enough.
Right.
I need to get my stuff right. I need to do something about
And,
this.
and Carlos, that certainly does happen at times where we've got to maybe hit rock bottom. Not that you hit necessarily you hit rock bottom, but sometimes you gotta get very low and to the point where it's like, okay, we have nowhere else to go. Now we got to get up. And usually in those instances, you see a rapid sort of incline, if you will, in some people.
Yeah.
But the idea is understanding, when that happened. That's why I was curious if it was a pivotal moment because sometimes for
Yeah.
people it was like, this one thing happened that kind of spark that woke things up, right? And so that's what it makes
Yeah.
it funny like that.
No, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. No, it was an accumulation. It's just that sometimes you don't take the time to realize you have to take time to reflect. We fill our plates so much,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
we don't have time to like step back and think, okay, what's going on here? Am I being a good father? Am I being a good husband? Am I eating, relatively good? Because we have all these areas in our lives that we kind of want to balance, right? But
Hmm.
sometimes there's going to be unbalance. Sometimes you're going to have to focus
Yeah.
on your career because you got this new thing you need to really push. You need to push in this new thing you got going on, and there's going to be some unbalance.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you got to put some system, some reminder, like every couple of weeks, every month, where you're like, okay, let me sit down, let me see how I'm doing here. Like, what's my
Yeah.
ranking? Well, 1 out of 10 on my family. How am I doing? A three? Okay, well that's not good. I got to do something about that, right? Doesn't have to be fancy. Just anything that makes you aware, of what is going on. Clarity, awareness, sitting down and just thinking, reflecting, breathing, and real because we're in my profession, the legal profession, man, it's always go go go. People are always
Yes.
working, they're always stressed out, they're working on the weekends, they're not eating healthy, they're not being the best parents because it's just the demands of the work. But you got to find time, you got to either get another job, if you want to be a good parent, you probably need to get another job, or you need to change things around so that you can handle those other things, because it's not just your job at the end of the day. Because people say, oh, you have this sexy job, but okay, at the cost of what? right? Of your health, at the cost of your kids not really talking to you anymore, not sharing, how their day went with you anymore. I understand, kids grow up, they're teenagers, they don't really want to talk to you, but it's so important, man. You got to be present, you got to be present.
Very much so. Very much so. So I'd love to. I mean, since you're teaching resilience and staying calm, what's the one thing you want people to understand about
Yeah.
resiliency?
Yeah. Resilience, people probably would define it as, or you would define it as flexible or being adaptable. Um, and that's true. You got to be flexible and adaptable, but you got to be flexible and adaptable in the face of uncertainty. And how do you do that, right? Well, if you think about working backwards, it goes back to increasing your ability, increasing your capacity, increasing your tolerance for
Mm,
uncertainty, for change, for adversity. So instead of trying to avoid or reduce the emotions that you're feeling, the stress, the anxiety, the fear, you gotta you gotta increase your tolerance for feeling those emotions.
mhm.
And what that does is that over time, you start to increase your capacity for it. You start to desensitize yourself to it. Because I always think about like, you know, presidents, leaders who have a ton of things going on at the same time. There's chaos like every day, right? How do they get 8 hours of sleep, right? They don't take a melatonin every day. They don't drug themselves. They
Right.
sleep. Sometimes they don't sleep, but for the most part, they get 6 to 8 hours of sleep. How do they do that? Well, they have this ability to handle increased doses of stress, right? Because they've put themselves through the fire. So they've increased that level of tolerance. Their tolerance is higher. Anybody can do that, but you gotta create the type of experiences that allow you to feel those emotions, and then train your mind to understand that those worst case scenario thoughts that you're having, they're not, 9 times out of 10 they're not going to happen.
Mhm.
And that's what stops us many times from jumping, from making that leap, is
Right.
thinking that worst case thought that we're having is going to happen. People are going to laugh at us, or this is going to happen, we're going to fail.
Right.
you know it's not going to happen. And if it does, you learn after the fact that you're still breathing, you're still alive, you can do it
Mhm,
again. Right.
mhm, 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 mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have an example from your own life where you were tested that fashion, had to go through that process yourself?
All the time, I'm always doing that. Like these days, what I'm doing is I like to call anti-humiliation. Right.
Okay.
It's making mistakes on purpose, intentionally humiliating myself, and almost like making a fool out of myself, like looking silly, failing on purpose, and training my mind to understand that those things that I thought were going to happen weren't going to happen. So whether it's going up to strangers, asking for crazy things, making crazy requests, interviewing people on the spot, um, things like that I've been doing.
Okay.
It's almost like, I don't know if you've seen the show Impractical Jokers,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's yeah, you've seen it, a group of buddies or comedians that go up to random people, that do crazy stunts, crazy things with
Right.
strangers. I don't do that. The purpose is not to be a clown. The purpose is to teach my brain that I can, that nothing's gonna happen. People are gonna
Right.
reject you. People are gonna say no, but you're still breathing.
That's
You're
right.
still
That's right.
breathing. Nothing's gonna happen, and you actually get stronger because you desensitize yourself. People don't want to be rejected, right? You don't want
No.
to get rejected. It's a
Right.
terrible feeling. So you need to go through that so that rejection doesn't stop you.
And sometimes playing safe isn't playing safe is not going to contribute to your overall growth or
Yeah,
personal development. You're going to stay where you're at because you stay where it's safe. You stay where you won't get the rejection. It'll
yeah,
always be positive, and you make it, and it's your comfort zone. But
yeah.
if you want to grow and truly develop, you got to break past that.
Yeah, comfort is such a drug, man. Like, the more you stay in your comfort zone, the harder it is to get out of it and take the stronger those negative thoughts are. It's so it's so hard to break out when you're so comfortable, when you have everything around you. But when you create this habit of friction, this habit of intentional discomfort, it makes it easier to try new things out, because you're in that constant, you're in that habitual response of putting yourself outside your comfort zone.
Right.
So you're not comfortable. You're comfortable in the uncomfortable. That's where you want to get, not
Hmm.
comfortable in the comfort in the comfort.
True, true, true.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very true. Um, uh, so I know you sort of give it your past, if you will, in terms of your professional and what you've done. Let's get into what's happening now with True Progress Lab. Sort of talk to our listeners about that and what it does and how it's looking to change the world.
Yeah, so True Progress Lab, like I was saying, I help people get calm, get bold, get after it, right? So what we do is we put people through experiences. So we teach them certain tools, right? These are science backed. They're also based on ancient philosophy, specifically Stoicism, that teach people how to manage their nervous system, how to manage their thoughts, how to manage their emotions. But we don't just give them the tools, we actually teach them how to use those tools in pressure situations. So we recreate environments where they're having trouble, maybe it's presenting, maybe it's having difficult conversations, maybe it's being a leader and being in the spotlight, leading with confidence. Maybe it's networking. And we recreate those environments to where they're able to be in those environments, but we give them the tools to learn how to be calm first.
Right.
Number one, how to be
Hmm.
calm first in those environments, because you can't be bold and confident if you're not calm, right?
Hmm.
Because once you're calm, then you can think clearly. Then you can use your intuition. Then you can be
Yes.
spontaneous. Then you can be authentic, right? So, calm, number one. After you build calm through challenges that we give you,
Hmm.
um, and you learn how to use those tools to be calm, then we increase the stress level. We
Okay.
increase it. So we have level 1 to level 10. Level 1, 2, 3 is warm up challenges. Then we increase it eventually to level 10 where you're doing something truly audacious, right? So if you want to be a leader and lead with confidence, well, you got to do things that require you to be super confident, right? So that could be speaking in front of a big crowd of people. That could be doing maybe stand-up comedy, an open mic night. That could be, it really is subjective, depends on each person's, where they are, what their baseline is. Um, and we also have physical challenges because it's
Hmm.
important. Physical challenges like exercise specifically, it's really a great arena to learn how to manage your thoughts and emotions because it's just you and the exercise, right? And your mind. So you do the rigorous physical exercise and it helps trigger uh, negative thoughts. I don't want to do this extra mile. I don't want to do this stupid exercise. I'm tired. This is hard. Perfect, right? That's what we want. And then
Right.
with the tools that we give you, you learn how to manage those negative thoughts. You learn to manage the emotions so that you do that last mile, you do that last rep. Because if you can't even finish your exercise, how do you think you're gonna do in the real world? You can't even doing the thing you want to do right at the workplace if you can't even finish your physical exercise. So it's a good way to learn how to manage your thoughts and emotions. So we have the physical challenges, and then we
Hmm.
have the mental conditioning, which is the recreated environments where you have to
Wow.
perform, right? And through that, through experiences and guidance, people become different versions of themselves. They
Amazing.
become better versions of themselves.
It must be amazing to watch a transformation as you see people change right in front of you.
Yeah, just one person at a time, man. It's beautiful to see, Everybody has this inner fighter in
Okay.
them, you know? Everybody has that inner fighter. It just has to be unleashed with the right guidance, with the right tools, you know? You have that. Everybody has that. But
Yeah.
it needs to get out. You need to get it out. You need to get it out through experiences, through showing yourself that you can do things.
Yeah.
right? And that's what we help people do. We help them become those fighters.
And the piece, and you mentioned a couple times that I'm going to highlight here, that's also quite important, is confidence.
Yeah,
When you go through these challenges, you do through the build momentum. These are all the little boosters that, increase that level of how you feel about yourself and increase your confidence and the ability to push forward. I
yeah,
wonder if you sort of give from your perspective how important confidence is to sort of being helping people achieve the kind of things that you're seeing.
yeah. Confidence. You, for me, confidence is, competence through repetition, like you said, right? You start creating that self belief, that self trust that you can do it. And then confidence is also being liberated from that fear of judgment, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like to think of confidence as more universal, doing things that are uncomfortable on an ongoing basis, where you develop that competence and that self trust,
Yeah,
where you're able to do things that you haven't had practice in. You haven't done the repetition, like you're playing the piano or an instrument through repetition, right? You get confident in that thing, right? But what about being confident in things you haven't tried before? Well, the way I like to think about that is by doing difficult things on a regular basis, so that when I see that difficult thing over there, I may not be competent in it, but I'm confident that I'm going to do well because I've
right.
proven to myself that I've done hard things before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that the repetition of doing uncomfortable things and hard things. It's super important, right? That's the
Absolutely.
whole point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have an example of maybe someone you're working with that you saw that significant change, like what they look like before and after kind of a thing?
Yeah. So I have this one client who I just finished with. We'll call him Joey. This guy was a perpetual overthinker and overplanner. He was super smart, but he just had this mental barrier of not getting past the things he needed to get to be successful. He was an entrepreneur, super smart, um, but the cold calling, he couldn't do
Mm,
the cold calling. He couldn't put himself out there enough, right? And so what we needed to do is create environments where he learned to be okay with making mistakes, with looking foolish, with looking silly, right? So we
yeah,
recreated the environment. We did crazy things, um, and also we helped him build his personal constitution because he wasn't really clear about what it is that he wanted to do with all this, right? So
got you.
because if you if you just do the things but you're not clear on who you are, who you want to be, any habits that you develop, they're not really going to last, right? Because they're in conflict with who you know yourself to be. If you keep telling
Hmm.
yourself, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not that kind of person, then when you develop those habits that you need to do, it's not going to last because the story you keep telling yourself, it's not congruent with what you're doing, right? So the personal constitution, working on that, and then developing the kind of habits that prove to himself that he can do hard things, right? Doing the
Right,
physical challenges, doing the physical exercise, and then doing the mental challenges, calling people, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable
right.
and looking silly, and doing public speaking events, things of that nature. And also, it's important to understand that you have to be able to do that. You have to want it. If you don't want
Yes.
it, then we can't help you. You have to have that initial desire of wanting
Yeah.
to change. Because if you
No,
don't
yeah.
want to change, nobody's going to help you, man.
Well, no,
Right?
you're absolutely right. Because I mean, I think we oftentimes forget that people are all, on their own journeys, doing their own battles, right? And so,
Yeah.
to invest time to try and change you, and they've got something in front of them, is it's better to deal with their own pathway too. And so,
Yeah.
we have to want it ourselves. We have because, and the other thing, a part of that too, a part that about all that that's important is it doesn't sustain itself. It doesn't if it doesn't come from us.
Yeah.
If our change is forced upon us, it's going to be short lived, right?
Right. It's going to be short lived for real. Like, that's true. And I've had people who come to us and they're so excited to work with us, and they do, and they pay us and everything, but they don't go through the program. We've had incidents where people actually pay, but they don't go through the program.
Mm,
And I'm like, why are you paying me if you're not going to go through it? But that's, unfortunately, that's a common thing. People pay for, it's like when you go to the mall, you go to the store, you buy things, you use them for a little bit, and then you just forget about it. Same thing with personal development with this kind of help. People pay for things, but they
Yep.
end up not using it.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's
Yep.
common,
Yep.
unfortunately.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right. So on that vein, then, if you were to give our listeners sort of one piece of advice about how they'd be able I guess when it comes to stepping into their own personal power, or living audacious, if you will,
yeah.
what would that be for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say number one thing you got to do is create proof of your capabilities, right? That you're that badass that you keep telling yourself that you are. And the way to do that is by creating what I like to call identity expanding experiences. So,
Okay.
creating challenges for yourself that are actually challenging, that actually push you, and that actually are hard, that make you feel those emotions and those thoughts, right? Because if it's easy for you, it doesn't really do anything. It just confirms that you know how to do that, right? But you have to create experiences for yourself, right? You have to teach your mind that it's okay to look silly, that it's okay to make mistakes, right?
Mhm.
That you're gonna survive them. You got to teach your mind that worst case scenario thoughts that you're having before the scary thing you're about to do, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to happen. How
Right.
you do that is by putting your first, number one, figuring out what is the thing that you're avoiding. What is the thing that is causing the fear? Because we're talking about boldness here, right? And
Yes. Yep.
boldness is often a byproduct of being able to manage the anxiety and the fear, right? So
Hmm.
you gotta figure out what is it that is causing the anxiety and the fear, right? Is it recurring presentations? Is it being in the spotlight? Is it uh, leading, right? Being in a leadership position.
Hmm.
Then you got to work backwards and say, okay, what are the necessary experiences that I need to have in order to be increasingly comfortable in these situations? Most of
Right.
the time, you need to recreate those environments, right? You got to recreate those
I love
environments.
that.
So that's where we come in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I love that the recreation of the environments and to yeah, it's like you're going through like a military training ground. That's what they do, right? They put their soldiers through these series of exercises. So it's not something that
exactly
you do.
right. Yeah, that's how the military does it. Like if you think about Navy SEALs, their training is more difficult than the actual mission. So that when they do the mission, they know exactly what they need. It's all instinctual, it's habitual because they've trained so hard for it. And that's how we Olympians too, Olympians train so hard so that when the thing comes, it's boom, 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 it's action. So that's how we have to think about things
Nice.
is training for the thing, so that when you have to do it, because you don't want to train for these things at the workplace. You don't want to
No,
be
no, no. Under fire.
no. Yeah, you got to perform, man. You gotta be you gotta shine, right? So you gotta do these things. You gotta train before you get in
Well,
there.
well, even on that point about the workplace, I mean, how often are individuals put into a new leadership position? Maybe they were performing, job A really, really well, and because they're performing well job A, they put them in, they get promoted to leadership, which is an entirely different type of job.
Yeah,
And I've been in situations where I feel like I'm going through like while this new leader is learning on the job, right? Staff are feeling the negative impacts, and not that they're doing it intentionally, they just don't
right.
know. And so I think a piece around really understanding, what this leadership role is, and also that what you're doing is different is so
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah, and it happens all the time, right? That happens all the time. People get placed in these new leadership positions. They don't know how to be a leader. They don't have that confidence yet, so they're kind of developing that confidence. And during that process, you have people who leave, because they
Right,
can't take it, or you have other people who are just it just creates that internal friction, right?
right.
Versus coming in that job with the leadership skill that you need. It's confidence, being able to know when you're making mistakes, being able to admit to making mistakes, being able to say I don't know the answer, but saying I'm going to find the answer, because
Hmm.
a lot of people please, they burn themselves out.
Yeah,
um, they point the finger, right, instead of admitting.
you got it. You got it. What's next for True Progress Lab in terms of its growth and how it wants to help people? Is there something next planned? Or?
Yeah, no, it's continuing to grow True Progress Lab, and getting the word out that You need to unleash that inner fighter. You need to be able to get it out. Everybody has that inner fighter, and just continue to spread that message, man, that boldness is what you need. Competence and confidence is nice, but if you want to get to that next level, you need to not just be competent and confident. You need to be able to take those necessary risks to get to that next level. You need to be able to be audacious, bold, right? Otherwise, you're going to just stay confident in your area, right? But you want to explore new opportunities, and that requires boldness. That requires audaciousness, audacity.
Bang on. It's preaching to the choir over here, Carlos. I'm with you loud and clear. That's awesome.
Yeah.
For listeners that want to connect with you directly, learn more about your work, and I should point out, you work with leaders as well, too, right? So
I work with rising leaders, managers, tech professionals, attorneys, and entrepreneurs.
Okay, yeah, no, it's fantastic. So if listeners want to connect with you directly, where can we send them?
Yeah, so if you want to email me, my email is hello@trueprogresslab.com. My website is trueprogresslab.com. And on socials, I'm at trueprogresslab.
Nice and easy.
Nice and easy.
Well, listen, Carlos, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. Great insights, great convo on audacity, and you definitely got a handle on that, which is great. And thanks again for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Ali. It was great being here.
Cool. Back where here on the podcast, much thanks and appreciation to Carlos for being here. During our chat, Carlos emphasized the importance of creating tangible proof of our capabilities through identity expanding experiences. He shared that stepping out of our comfort zones allows us to build self-trust and resilience. What I personally loved about the conversation with Carlos is his authenticity and the way he shared his own journey of overcoming self-doubt and building resilience. His insights on intentionally exposing ourselves to discomfort to foster growth resonated deeply with me for sure. And I'd encourage listeners to connect with him directly. You can reach him at hello@trueprogresslab.com or at his website, trueprogresslab.com. Be sure to follow him on social media, also at True Progress Lab, for additional insights and inspirations. Carlos is offering exclusive resources for our listeners, including a free guide that can help you craft your personal constitution and strategies to build resilience. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us on another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you found value in our discussion today, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with family and friends if you haven't already done so. Your support means the world and helps us continue to inspire others to live audaciously. Remember, the journey to your best life begins with bold steps, so go out there and embrace the audacity within you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.